I know that I look like I'm Doug Casey here or whatever.
That's okay.
Um, Got to figure
So,
out how to get a few passengers.
hey,
So,
let me finish. Hello, welcome to the Spy Guy. We're going to do the Venezuela panel part two with the geopolitical guys, as opposed to the domestic U.S. guys who kind of took over the last stream and really send us off down into certain rabbit holes. When we started talking about housing construction in Florida, I was like, okay, I think that we're done here. So we have David S. here again, and Wasserman is back, and we're going to be talking the results of Venezuela. And Adam has some questions about Syria, which David is the expert on. Go ahead.
okay, let's start with Venezuela. Look, I don't know about Wasserman, but me, I focus 100% on foreign policy. I don't get involved with domestic whatsoever. But I will say that what happened today in Venezuela, which I have mixed feelings about,
Yeah.
but I am a Trump supporter, so let me make a disclaimer on that before we start. If it was not Trump doing it, I would be completely opposed to it. But it was driven completely by domestic concerns. He has not been able to enforce anything in the Middle East. He hasn't been able to enforce anything against the EU and Ukraine. And he has the America First crowd reeling after Bibi's visit, which I'm in the minority. I don't think it was a successful trip whatsoever. I think Trump did everything to build up Bibi, but Bibi didn't do anything to build up Trump. Now, I'm going to tell you what I think the purpose of today's operation was, and you may be a little bit surprised. But do you remember the Night of the Long Knives and the Rome Purge in 1934?
Well, I wasn't there for it, but I do know of it.
I remember the Canadian one.
Okay, so why did the Reichskanzler feel it was necessary to purge his best friend and kill his best friend and kill the SR? There was a very specific reason as to why he had to go against his best friend. Now, Maduro was not Trump's friend, but they had cordial conversations, and Maduro had offered Trump 90% of everything in Venezuela. But remember, you have the Venezuelan Cuban lobby, the neocons, and the extreme neoliberals. But the worst thing is the actual lobby itself. So the reason why the Night of the Long Knives took place was because the army put its foot down. Either you get rid of the SR,
Yep,
or you will not be in power next month. And Trump is starting to feel the heat with all these people that have turned against Trump, that are starting to gang up with the Democrats, with Newsom, the America First crowd, and they're all turning against Trump. So Trump, in my view, had to show and send a very strong message that was never done under Obama, and that Bush botched terribly. That he was a macho, that he could get things done, and he could get things done without bringing us into a 10-year war of different countries in the Middle East that literally cost a couple of million lives. This action against Maduro today is more serious than what Laughing Boy Ronnie did against Grenada. That was a tiny little nothing. This is a real country, Venezuela. So, and I believe because of this, he will also be very lukewarm on this. It's not something I like. He may have to do an operation in Iran as well, because he needs to establish himself as a powerful president.
Okay,
That was the only reason for what happened this morning. There was no other reason.
Well, there are
And
other
by the
reasons,
way,
yeah.
I see
but I'm
that.
talking about the primary reason of the specific act this morning. I can give you three other reasons. One reason is terrible, and the Venezuelans are going to suffer even worse than they're already suffering. But also trying to consolidate the Western Hemisphere again and bring back the Monroe Doctrine. That was very important. Look, Trump could have worked with Maduro. There was no question. Remember that the misery that the Venezuelans have gone through for the last 10 years, 12 years. They started going through this misery around 2014. I was in Venezuela. I made my money in Venezuela. I know the whole story much better because I lived there. Uh, Venezuela had a very profitable period in the who was in power in the 90s? Clinton. All right. But Clinton was basically the father of what I like to call extreme neoliberalism. Now, those that know me know that I am no fan of neoliberalism, and I am certainly no fan of the financialized, multinationals trying to take over.
Mhm.
So you had a president, Carlos Andres Perez. So on paper, Venezuela was the wealthiest country in the Western Hemisphere, even wealthier on paper than the United States in terms of per capita. But the reality was only 10 or 15% were wealthy and the rest were ignored because you put hands into a few corporations. It was an oil boom in the 90s, but the disparity started getting greater and greater and greater. And if that was not bad enough, they all of a sudden called a scandal on Carlos Andres Perez, and they appointed Rafael Caldera, who was never meant to be president, who was as dull as there were, and the poverty, because this was a time when oil prices became very, very low, the poverty just soared into the ceilings. And much worse than the United States were the Canadian mining companies.
Oh yeah.
If you talk to people in Peru, if you talk to people in Venezuela, wherever there's mining companies, the United States corporations seem like a saint compared to the Canadian mining companies.
Oh yeah.
So Chavez comes to power, and the first thing he does say, we got to do some things about the poor. We got to put some hospitals. We got to put some schools. We have to make some distribution because there was absolutely no distribution. Now, I was still playing the piano in the 90s. Of course, I love being around rich people. It was fantastic. But things got to the point where something had to be done. The disparity was too great. So Chavez went to the United States right after he was elected. A couple of months later, he was elected, I think, in June. The General Assembly was in September. He went to the United States. And when he got to the General Assembly, what did he do? He switched to English and he started quoting Walt Whitman and started talking about his love for the United States. And he went and he had meetings and he wanted to have a very good working relationship with the United States. As a matter of fact, and I would never have had a business had this worked, he ended exchange controls that had been put in by Carlos Andres Perez, and he did exactly what the United States wanted, which was to liberalize the currency. Well, the elites were furious. They were beyond furious. And just like the Cubans, because Venezuela is very near to Cuba, they started amassing a very powerful lobby in Miami and later on in Washington. And of course, Venezuela is a much richer country than Cuba, even though the Cubans are billionaires that are in Miami. The Venezuelan elites have substantially more in terms of land, in terms of this, in terms of that. So, so for the first 2 years, Chavez did exactly what the U.S. wanted, except that he did not nationalize the oil companies for a while.
Mm-hmm.
He did pretty much what the U.S. wanted, continued on the policy, but there were some social programs. Well, the elites were determined to get rid of them because how dare you have a brown guy that's not one of us in power.
Mm-hmm.
So about 2 years into his term, the elite organized with some rogue people in the Cuban lobby, both in the United States and in the in Miami, but also in the Congress, like Melendez and some of the Roy Lotinen and some of the others, to make a coup attempt against Chavez and kill him. And they were able to kidnap him from the palace and take him to some place, a dungeon. I don't know how, but something went wrong. And 3 days later, when Chavez was supposed to be done away with, he and his supporters managed to get him out and take him back to the palace. And this was backed 100% by mainly Democrats, not Republicans. And that's when things started going crazy. That's when he nationalized the oil companies. That's when he still doing business with the states, yes, but he became very hostile towards Bush. Well, I was hostile towards Bush. I don't know how anybody could have liked Bush. And Clinton was out, Bush was in, and that's when the war started. And the biggest part of the war was from your friends Trudeau and all these guys with the Canadian mining companies because they were the ones that were really pushing to get rid of Chavez. So what started to happen was that they started appropriating and stealing properties belonging to the elites, especially the ones that he felt were out in the group that wanted to kill him. Shouldn't have done that. But that's a natural reaction when you're an army colonel or whatever he was
Mhm.
against the elite. He was seething in anger from that. So the more properties that he expropriated or nationalized or took away, and they did pay compensation, but it wasn't good compensation. They did pay compensation. The more the rift grew. Now, unlike Ahmed Chalabi with Iraq, Venezuela is very close to Cuba, and all the Venezuelans have nice condos in Miami. Well, who else has nice condos in Miami? All the Cubans and all the Cuban nationalists, the stuff that Marco Rubio is from. So that gave them an extremely powerful platform, very much like the Ukrainians have in Canada.
Yeah.
And so at this point, oil started going up, up, up in price. So Chavez had the black market. It's true, but the airlines, which I was involved in, as a private person, and other companies who were doing business in Venezuela were making so much money from the black market, which is very rare. But in this case, it was a political statement to be independent. It was not a financial necessity. So American Airlines put on as many flights as they could because they were making 5 times the amount of money they could make to any other destination because they could charge $1,000 to go to Venezuela, but people were only paying $300 in reality, or $350. So this was tolerated for a while, and then problems started. Now, the first problem was really, really interesting. In 2010, for some reason, oil goes up and down and up and down. So oil was down in 2007 and 8, and in 2010, it reached probably the first and only time close to $140 a barrel. Well, at that point, the black market in Venezuela started to go away, and it got to the point where it was less than 10%. So arbitrageurs such as myself and others couldn't make much money, but Venezuela almost became stabilized. When that happened, the elites got even angrier because Venezuela was starting. They never got there, but we're starting to have a middle class.
Mhm.
Now, the favela class or the rancho class is so big in Venezuela, it wasn't a large middle class, but the middle class was growing. But the corruption in Venezuela was off the charts because you have endemic corruption, just as you do in Brazil. Then in 2011, what happened? Something very weird happened. Chavez got poisoned. He went to Cuba. He came back from Cuba and passed away almost immediately. Was very, very strange, extremely strange. So Maduro, the union boss of one of the bus companies, very similar to Lula in a way, comes in wearing a very simple suit, no uniform, no comandanchi, no comandante, el jefe, and all that. That we want to reset relations with the United States, do a complete reset. And he made sure that everybody dressed the normal way you would dress, none of the fanfare, none of that. Still corrupt as ever because Diosdado Cabello And the people, Venezuela is one of the most corrupt countries that there are.
Mhm.
I mean, not as corrupt as Mugabe, but very, very corrupt. Well, by that time, the Venezuelan lobby in both Miami and in uh, Washington, oh, no, you don't. And they started leaning on Obama and leaning on Obama. Bush did not destroy Venezuela. Obama destroyed Venezuela.
Mhm.
They kept lobbying for these sanctions based on the fact that they wanted their properties back. Of course, they never bothered to say why they lost their properties, which because they tried to assassinate the guy.
Yeah.
So at that point, prices of oil started going down, going down, going down, and Venezuela started running out of money because he never diversified the economy because of the embargoes from the U.S. and Europe. All the other companies that were there, like Teva Pharmaceuticals and others, left the country, and all of a sudden, for the first time, poverty came in. People may have been poor in the 90s and all the way up to about 2010. No, the 90s was still Carlos Andres Perez.
Mm.
He came in about 1998, 1999. But everybody had plenty to eat. Everything was fine. But they were starting to put some stupid socialist stuff in about importing food rather than producing it yourself. The same mistake that all these countries make. All the socialists and the cronyism started, and all the side games. So that created an inefficient food economy. Well, in the meantime, um, the elites wanted Maduro to leave. He wouldn't leave. So finally, they were able to, after 7 years, to put in the worst type of sanctions that all they did was starve everybody living there. And so all these people saying people are starving because Maduro is so bad. Well, yes, the socialist part became out of control. But far worse were the sanctions, and the sanctions were put on by these elites. The reason why Maria Corina Machado is popular is because everybody is poor. They rely on subsidies, but she is from that very same elite. They don't care about 98% of the people living there. They don't only want to take their properties back, which I think they have a right to get back their properties, but they want to run the country the way it was run under Caldera and in the latter phases of Carlos Andres Perez, which is you give nothing to these people, you keep them very poor, but this time it's worse. Because now what they want to do is the same thing that's being done in Argentina. They want to bring in BlackRock to financialize everything. They want to bring in the huge corporations from the outside. It's an extreme neoliberalism. Well, Carlos Andres Perez was extreme neoliberalism, and it led to the conditions that caused Chavez to come in the first place. So I see all these people celebrating on social media, and I've come to the conclusion I don't even think 5% understand the history and why it happened. And the old saying, first time tragedy, the second time farce. Well, you're about to see a farce. The starvation in Venezuela had more to do with the U.S. sanctions. And most sanctions around the world that the U.S. imposes are imposed by ethnic groups in the United States. The Majinsky Act by the Jewish lobbies, the Ukrainian lobbies, the Venezuelan lobbies, the Cuban lobbies, the God knows whatever lobbies put in all these sanctions. In London, it was the Caesar sanctions against the Assad government, which broke the country. And that's the idea that you break the country, just like with Iran right now. And the idea is the people will just revolt and you'll put in some pro democracy, which is nonsense because nobody cares about democracy whatsoever. It's all about how can we control all the resources. So Maduro actually offered Trump. First, he offered him 80% of the resources, and then he offered him 90% of the resources, and he offered Chevron full resources. But the lobby would not let up. Then Trump got himself into a position due to the situations with the Ukraine war, not being able to conclude the Ukraine war, the European Union, and not being able to get Bibi Netanyahu to budge on anything. And then he has all these tariffs going up and down and up and down. So Trump had to make a statement that I am the president. I will act if I have to act. That's how I interpret this today. It's not the normal interpretation that you're going to see. But if you look at the history, it has nothing to do with the nonsense that's being spewed on social media.
Oh yeah, I just couldn't watch. I tried to watch a little bit of it, and I'm just getting the same message from the usual types. Redacted.
I would add. I wouldn't add to any of the history, background, or motivation, but I would add to the impact. And I said this to David earlier when in the day. If you believe Mercouris, which I do, that there was absolutely no one in Washington that knew this was going to happen. Then
No, Mercouris did not say that. He didn't say anything about Trump. What he said was, or at least Christopher, one of them, when they had their podcast together today, they basically stated it was a little bit, a little different. No, the main crowd didn't know, but and he didn't say. You're right. He didn't mention my premise that Trump had to do something to establish himself as president. That I got from private conversations.
but in his private.
But remember what Mercouris said. But Mercouris said something I liked. The one beneficiary from this is Russia.
True enough, but back to Mercouris. What he said is this didn't go through the Senate committee, and he implied that no one in Washington knew this was happening.
None of these coups ever go to the Senate committee. None of them. The only ones that ever went was the Iraq War.
Yeah.
But little operations like this never go, and they shouldn't go, quite frankly.
He implied,
but what Trump did was an act of piracy today, but he had to do it. He was losing. He hasn't had any victories. Nobody respects him, and especially domestically, I'm sorry to say.
Oh, yeah. That was our conversation earlier.
Mercouris implied, at least in my read of what he was implying, he implied that nobody in Washington, this took everyone in Washington by surprise.
Well, but you see, okay, again, so let me come back to the night of the long knives. Sometimes you have to take people by surprise.
Yeah, we're not arguing.
I'm just take people by surprise.
I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying that this is my understanding. My understanding is that it took everyone by surprise. And good. I can't help.
So I agree with you. I agree with you. But
so let me make a few other observations. I can't help but notice that they didn't return Maduro by air. They returned Maduro in the Iwo Jima. This to me is not a trivial.
Where?
The Iwo Jima is an aircraft carrier.
They're returning Maduro. They're bringing Maduro to the U.S. by aircraft carrier, and this is not, in my opinion, this is not a trivial or insignificant, thing. I think it's very significant. I think that this is basically Trump moving against the administrative state. I think that he slapped his dick on the table. He said, "Actually, I know more than you. I can do what I want when I want to do it, and so much so, and I can do it through the military, whose loyalty I command. So much so that I can put this guy in an aircraft carrier with 1,000 seamen and not be worried about his security."
Excellent point.
Yeah. Yeah, this is not an insignificant choice.
Yeah, they really want him alive because Maduro knows a lot of dirt on a lot of people, especially in the Democrat Party, who he was in cahoots with.
So
the problem is, will they treat him like Noriega, or will they treat him well enough where they can actually learn some information?
Yeah.
Well, to me, this is Trump and Hegseth drawing a line in the sand for the first time in Trump's presidency. He is. This, in my opinion, this is direct defiance of the administrative state. The first direct
excellent. Oh, yeah, I think that's an excellent point. I didn't think about that. But, Maduro had an opportunity to leave. Trump did give him an opportunity to go.
I
He
know.
didn't.
So I'm not, and again, I'm not arguing with anything you said, and I'm not saying this as though it's like a good or a bad thing. I'm simply making a neutral observation that, in my opinion, this is Trump's
Oh, I
first.
think it's fast. I think you're making a fascinating observation. Not a neutral. I think you're making a fascinating observation.
Fair enough. Thank you. I appreciate that.
McCurris did not bring. I didn't see McCurris bring that up though.
No, well, Mercouris is very predictable. He takes everything at face value. When Biden was president, Biden was a competent leader for whom made.
Oh, I don't. Do you really believe he believes that? I mean, if he believes that, then
that is Mercouris's modus operandi, which is he takes all authoritative sources at face value. He may or may not personally believe it. It doesn't matter. His reason why is he will never mention anything that is remotely conspiracy theory. Like his modus operandi is
he's smart. He's smart that way. Yeah.
Yeah. So of course Mercouris didn't mention any of this. You know, it's not official diplomatic community. He'll only traffic in everything in something that's more or less widely acknowledged by the international.
Yeah, McCurris basically always refers to the Financial Times, to the Times of London, to the Wall Street Journal. And probably in his position, that's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
We're not in that position. I mean,
yeah, I listen to him religiously. I respect most of what he says. I take a lot of what he says as probably one of the most accurate sources. But you have to know. Nobody's perfect. Nobody gives all truth all the time. Oh,
sure. And remember that a lot of the people I read and listen to are more radical than he is, and that's why. I mean, for example, there's only 3 podcasts that are, aside from the think tanks. Think tanks are good, but of opinionated. And the one guy I've started not liking now is Pascal Lotaz at Neutrality Studies, because he's become so anti-Israel and everything is Palestine that he's becoming too much giving editorials, whereas before he wasn't. Mm-hmm. So the other 2 that are still pretty good, McCurris is the best, and I think Glenn Deason does a pretty good job. I know he doesn't like Israel and all that, but Glenn Deason is.
I used to listen to him more, but he's gone off the reservation in my opinion. He's become tedious. I'll say that.
No, but Deason gets a lot of good people on that McCurris doesn't.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but again, the people that he gets on are a little bit tedious as well.
Sometimes you need to listen to those tedious people. Just like with me, I'm probably not very interesting to listen to either. But I can give you a history of Venezuela that the other people won't do.
I do listen to him. It's funny when you give the history of Venezuela. I respect that. I think we've already talked about this, which was when Putin did the interview with Tucker Carlson.
But he went rings around. He went rings around Tucker Carlson.
Everyone was outraged that Putin gave him a history lesson, apparently.
Well, what's wrong with a history? What is wrong with a history lesson?
Exactly.
Now,
right?
I have a friend of mine who got angry at that history lesson because he's a Jewish guy. He's not anti-Russia, but he's talking about what Stalin did with the kulaks and with the Holodomor. Well, a lot of people say the Holodomor should not be counted because the Holodomor took place very much in Russia, just as much as it did in Ukraine.
Kazakhstan,
there is a lot of
casualties. Most people died in Kazakhstan than anywhere else per capita, and the reason we don't talk about it is there's no large Kazakh diaspora in the West.
Well, furthermore,
that's exactly it.
I'll also say that I object on a pedantic level. I object to laying it all at the feet of Stalin. Lenin was well on his way to killing 3 or 4 million people who lived in Ukraine, what is now Ukraine, before Stalin ever had his crack at it.
Yeah.
Well, Lenin never got that far, but you're probably correct. I mean, that's. I think the reason why a lot of us give Lenin a pass is because so many of his books and essays are so good and even apply till today. So we give him more of a pass than we give to Dugashvili, and then we give to Stalin. So we never think of Lenin really, although it was either, I think it was it Lenin or was it Trotsky or one of these people said never let Stalin come to power. So I don't know which one it was that said that. So.
Lenin
Well,
said
you
it, I
know,
believe.
Lenin was just as murderous.
Yeah.
Except we're still all quoting from what is to be done. So,
Yeah.
um,
So
so
anyway,
coming
back
back
to
to the
the
Venezuelan thing today, I'm going to summarize it as saying your point and my point actually dovetail.
yes, that's what
Uh,
I think. Yeah.
I mean, basically, what you had in 1934 was the military and the elites in Germany say either you put your forces in order or you're out of here. Probably
But
would have saved
but
quite
this
a
is a
few
real
million, and it would have.
but this is a real declaration of war. I expect things to really heat up now, because Trump was avoiding declaring all-out war on the administrative state for the first year.
He had no choice. He had no choice
You
this
and I
time.
agree again. You and I agree. I'm
And
not.
I will tell you, you know who I believe, and I believe that there are two people that don't like him that are going to respect him a lot. One kind of likes him. I think Lindsey Graham is going to pay attention. I think Lindsey Graham will understand this guy is not a pushover. And strangely enough, I think Hillary Clinton will also understand that he's not a pushover because she's indicated. She may not like him, but he's not a pushover. He has to
Well,
tell that. Look, I mean, I am reading again and again 2027, impeachment against Trump, impeachment against Trump, impeachment. Now, if I'm reading that just looking at social media, what do you think he's being briefed on? And
well, but you know,
unfortunately, he's
he
going to have to
assumes,
do the same thing with Iran.
but he assumes that every briefing is a lie, and as well he should.
I think Tulsi's been pretty good with him.
Yep.
Fair enough, but Trump would be a fool that I don't think he is if he did not start by assuming every briefing from every person was a lie. We've talked about this. When you're in power,
Well, it seems that recently Tulsi has been becoming more influential in the White House than before.
well,
Yeah.
I mean, she's arms more intelligent than Pete Hegseth. I mean, that,
we won't disagree on any of this. I'm just saying that he's obliged. A man in his position must start from the assumption that something in what he's hearing isn't true. It's just a fact of life.
now, he did do something yesterday that I did not like. He put out a bulletin for all Americans to leave Russia. Now, I don't understand what that was all about. He's been very nasty to Zelensky, but he told everybody to leave Russia. I would really like to understand why they're playing that tactic again.
Well,
Considering that Dimitrov is coming to the States every 2 weeks. So
Yeah.
I can't really understand.
it's more of his sowing chaos and confusion.
Yeah. Probably.
Constructive chaos.
Yeah. Well, look over here, don't look over here.
Yeah. Get out of Russia. Next date, I take out Venezuela. That's
Well, it's
pretty much-
interesting, but actually, Russia will profit handsomely from this because
Yes.
now they can raise the price of their oil to China.
Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
That's true.
Well-
From that, they are losing the weapons contracts. That is going to hurt them a bit. The Venezuelan army has been. Why did they rescue Maduro back in the 2018s? Is because with the Wagner Group, mercenaries arriving at basically to prevent the coup from succeeding or the revolt from succeeding, is because Venezuela owes like $10 billion in weapons contracts to Russia. And back then, that was a real chunk of change for Russia. Now, Russia's in a different position, but I did an article for a now defunct magazine called Modern War on the state of the Venezuelan military at that time, back in the 2014-15 range. And it was very much, billions of dollars in weapons contracts to Russia.
Well, I think that in the conversations that the Trump administration has been having with the Russians, they are outlining spheres of influences. So, in other words, and I think McCurris may have brought this up. I mean, the U.S. can no longer be, and it should never have been, the world's policeman.
No.
They were not set up to be the British Empire. To be the
Nope.
British Empire, that means you had the empire in Africa, the empire in South Asia. The U.S. never had this.
And look how it ended.
So, well,
JP asked
because
a
it got
good question in the
mismanaged.
comments, by the way. He said, do you think Russia was consulted? Oh, yeah. They wanted because they would want to make sure that all those advanced missile systems that the Russians have been supplying Maduro were be turned off for this operation.
Oh, I agree. I think that basically, I think the U.S. is trying to come up with a new framework where we control our hemisphere, Russia controls some parts, and China controls some parts. And as McCurry said today, at the very top level, the countries least likely to get into a confrontation are the United States, Russia, and China. As the three powers, they're going to compete, and they're going to compete vigorously. But they themselves do not want to get into competition with each other. They want to have some type of spheres of influence, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, and I do very much agree with both statements. JP said something about wanting to explore some point earlier. What was it, JP? That you wanted to...
He wanted to talk about the Venezuela thing, and then yeah, he wanted to talk to you, I guess, about some stuff going on. But then we got Paul came in, and we went off the rails.
I just wanted to open the door.
I can't see any notes. I cannot see any notes, so I don't know why.
There's
But
a comment section that's here.
So anyway, I just wanted to open the door to JP if you wanted to bring something. If you wanted to bring something back,
that's why.
I just wanted to say to JP, if you wanted to bring a topic back, put it in the chat. Yeah. Well, so Taiwan. Yeah. Taiwan.
Now, while we're waiting, do we have a question, or should I go on to an adjacent subject?
Well, no. JP just made a comment regarding the sphere of influence question, saying that Taiwan is a massive sticking point.
I don't think so. Think so. No, I think that what's happening in Taiwan is the Kuomintang party is far more popular than the person that's in charge right now, whoever the person is. And they're about to go to China and have a meeting. You need to remember something about Taiwan and also even Korea. Who's Taiwan's biggest trading partner? Who bailed them out of the 2008 financial crisis? Taiwan and China are very interconnected on a day-to-day basis, more than the United States. So we've installed a ferocious hawk as president with this whole independence thing. But the majority of people in Taiwan, and correct me if I'm wrong, are speaking Chinese or Taiwanese Chinese. They're not speaking
a different
full Formosan.
Yeah, they definitely are diverging culturally, from what I understand. Taiwan still does is going off culturally in a different way. They're traditionally Chinese language, versus China has a lot more English or other foreign concepts allowed into the language. It's like the difference between Quebecois French and Parisian French.
Well, they don't have any interest.
No.
China has no interest in attacking Taiwan, and quite frankly, the best way to solve the Taiwan problem is what Trump is doing. Just move all those essential chip manufacturing outlets to Arizona and just get them out of Taiwan. If you do that, you solve the problem, 90% of it right away, don't you?
Well, it's a military thing. I think eventually they might split off, but I don't think there's any invasion happening, especially when I talk to some of my friends in the American military industrial complex, and they're all convinced Taiwan has tactical nuclear weapons that they bought from Pakistan. That's
I don't think that Taiwan and China are interested in getting into a fight. I think this current president, is this a woman right now? I mean, the current president apparently is kind of a doozy. But in general, I don't think they're interested in getting into a fight.
I believe it is a man, but what happened is the parliament vote went to Kuomintang. So he doesn't have a
Was it the Kuomintang? But the Kuomintang is pro-China.
Yeah. Yep. It's a really weird thing, but they're pro the status quo, I would think, is the best way to call what the Kuomintang is.
Well, okay, you have to remember something about, there were two very nasty messages that were fired off at all of the Asian tigers. The culling of Shinzo Abe
Mhm.
and the kidnapping, illegal kidnapping of President Duterte in the Philippines. And that was basically a sign saying, if you're a tiger, you're with the West, you are not with China. And here's what can happen to you.
Mm.
And I don't think that was done by accident. What was done to Duterte was simply a warning. Don't even think of getting aligned in China's sphere of influence, which is where you're at. You're in China's sphere of influence.
And I'll say this about Taiwan and U.S. foreign policy, which is I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe that Trump is going to try and paint the U.S. into a corner, ceding so much territory outside of its sphere of influence and investing so heavily inside of its sphere of influence that there's no going back.
Yeah.
I think that's the right thing. I mean, I think Trump is doing the right thing, investing, even though I don't like the government here, investing in Argentina. Now, I'm going to ask you guys a question. I see a problem in Latin America, Ibero-America, whichever one you want to call it. I don't see Mexico as a problem, but I see Brazil as a major problem.
Yeah.
With the Lula government, it's really going off the rails.
Mm.
Everything from the unlimited corruption, the drug trafficking, and everything else. The corruption in government itself. One of the things that Milei is riding on, even though he did a couple things that I don't like right now, for example, he brought back the secret police the last couple of days, which I think is a terrible thing. But I think the U.S. has a challenge with Brazil, and I don't know what that challenge is, but it's. I think that Venezuela is only interesting for those that are interested in Hezbollah, but in terms of far bigger problems for the U.S. itself, I would say Brazil is really. Bolivia. We managed to get our guy in Bolivia. What are your guys' feelings about the whole Brazilian thing?
I haven't thought much about Brazil in a long time, but there's a very, very long history of anti-U.S. direct action in Brazil, right? I mean, they, especially so when Obama came in, the powers that be in Washington had decided that the U.S. was out of the manufacturing business and they were in the intellectual property business. And
financialization business.
Yeah, true enough. And Brazil completely flouted that. That's the last time I paid attention. But Brazil was not going to have anything to do with that.
Well, they should be paying attention to Brazil. I think Brazil is going to become more and more problematical if the PT stays in power. And that's actually good for Milei. Because from a financial standpoint, Argentina is a complete basket case. And the neoliberalism is putting a lot of people into poverty, although they would swear that that's not the case. Look how many people are out of poverty, which is not the case at all. It's that the rich people can travel more.
JP made a comment.
I just saw it. You saw my face? One of the commenters made it. Said Brazil is a tough nut to crack. Oh, thank you.
Oh, yeah.
It's very, very tough nut to crack. I mean, it's a wonderful country. Brazil is a very, in terms of the people, the population is.
The rest of Central America, South America, it was Portuguese, not Spanish. So it also.
Remember, the population of Brazil is overwhelmingly pro-United States, but the government of Brazil is so corrupt, and it's so.
Well, let me ask you a question, David. You keep talking about corruption in South America, and
I don't mind certain levels of corruption.
Let me ask my question. So I had always taken, because I'm older like you. For me, the last time I was in Venezuela, for example, I think was '86. So I had always taken.
I was in Venezuela all the way to 2013. So.
Yeah. So I'd always taken South American corruption just as a given, nothing special, nothing. It's just the way it was.
Yes, I don't have a problem. No, corruption actually is nice in some ways. For example, in the old days, if you had to put up with the horrors of the U.S. police, if you would come down to this part of the world and the cops stopped you for a ticket, you would pay a little money and just be on your way, which was
exactly right.
far more pleasant. It all depends on the level of corruption.
Well, this is why I wanted to ask you. So I just took South American corruption for granted. It wasn't, because I had enough money to live with it. It wasn't particularly unpleasant for me.
Well, no, it wasn't. It was quite easy to live because you have two types of corruption: day-to-day corruption, which is piddle crap. It's nothing. The problem is that today you have, of course, the cameras and everything, which makes that more difficult. Here's a problem with Brazil, and it's a little bit like somebody said once about Argentina, La República des Advogados, of the Republic of the Lawyers. So you have very expensive lawyers in Brazil, and who are the main customers are the trafficants and the cartels. So everything, the courts and everything are built around the cartel business and this tremendous movement of drugs. Or if it's not about that, it's going after banks and companies that they feel have crossed the line. So, for example, before Lula came into power, you have a population of 210 million people. It goes between 207 to 220 million, kind of goes up and down. Now, when I first came to Brazil, started living in Brazil, you had about 100,000 people in prison. Well, under Lula, it's gone up to 900,000. And that's because they've invested so much in all this law enforcement. But, you have private planes and people setting people up. Well, you saw what they did to Bolsonaro. It was horrible what they did to Bolsonaro. And that alone explains you. And you even have Glenn Greenwald vociferously complaining about it. And he was someone that did not like Bolsonaro.
Yeah.
You have a problem. So, I mean, basically, this judge, who is basically the Wyszynski to the South, I mean, he operates exactly as Wyszynski in Stalin. If you say one wrong word, you're going to the prison. And so, of course, they put Bolsonaro, who's in the worst health right now. He's having operations due to his stabbing in 2018, which they never investigated. And they have him in prison, and the guy is dying. I mean, and it's a terrible, terrible witch hunt. But behind it all is that you have the huge cartels and these other huge corrupt companies paying all the lawyers. So you end up with a systemic corruption. That's when corruption is no problem. Actually, a little bit of corruption is good. Believe it or not, most people won't say that.
That's what I wanted to talk to you about, because corruption isn't, it's not just one flavor.
Corruption is a good thing, but you don't want a system like the United States where everything is so rigid, or in Switzerland that you have no angles at all. That's equally bad. You need some flex. Corruption can be substituted with the word flexibility to a degree. But no, it is. On a small scale, it's flexibility. Just take care of the problem and, okay, go along your way. But when the whole country becomes enveloped by it, which is what's happened in Ukraine, for example, now you're in a real problem. And that always is the risk. You don't want to live in a country where the rules are so strict that for anything you go to jail. There's no way to live. I mean, you feel like you're in a straitjacket. But at the same time, you don't want to get into a systemic situation, which so many countries are in the world, where basically the bribes get higher and higher and higher and higher, and it becomes just a complete mess. And so you'll notice that when Lula was coming back from Malaysia, there was a big crackdown in Rio for the Comando Vermelho. And these drug cartels, many, many people got killed and all that. That's what the United States wanted. That's what Trump wanted. He did that to show off to Trump. But what he didn't do was attack the far greater cartels, which is the PCC, Principal Comando de Capitolio in Sao Paulo. And why? Because this is where his people are in Sao Paulo. They're 5 times bigger than the Comando Vermelho. So it's even your cameras, those dreaded cameras and radars, which for me are the most corrupt things that there are. That's legal corruption, by the way. In fact, somebody from Venezuela once told me how legally corrupt the U.S. is. You have legal corruption also.
Yeah.
And so basically, what you're doing is it's Brazil. They say about, for example, the cameras. One of the biggest industries in Brazil is la fábrica dos multas, los fábricas dos multas. it's the industry, the fining industry. Well, you shouldn't drive fast. Well, you should drive like a castrated turtle. Well, I've got news for you. Most people are not built to drive like castrated turtles.
Mhm.
Oh, no. Very politically incorrect to say that, but I mean, you're trying to put everybody in the matrix. Well, Brazilians aren't built like that. You could be driving, for example, in Minas Gerais. It's one of the wealthier states of Brazil. You're up in the hills, and you turn the corner in a rural area where there's not a gas station for 100 miles, and there's a camera because some local guy wants to make some money. Or if you leave, for example, from Goiás Airport in Sao Paulo, and you're going up Vinci Três de Maio, and you're going up the hill, you have apartment buildings full of cameras that are just all these cameras to catch as many people. Well, this is not a way. I mean, I don't think many people would say that this is exactly the way that things should be done. Maybe you think different, Wasserman.
It's also corrosive because wherever it appears, a culture of denunciation is corrosive.
Yes, that's actually what you had in Brazil, starting in the carnivals when they started with right around the time in the late '90s when the abuse industry got going, and they said, and they would have songs. It's carnival time. It's time to denounce, 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 and they really had songs about denouncing. Well, if you start denouncing so much, you're right back to the days of the Cheka
Mhm.
the Soviet times, aren't you?
That's exactly right. It's exactly right, and that's why I got out of Canada, because Canada's turning into that.
Well, and London is too. Look how many people for making a comment get into trouble in London now. So in Brazil, you have this whole of, or as Mike Benz would say, the whole of society of corruption. It's like you have a whole of society which is ludicrous.
Mhm.
And Brazil was one of the freest countries on the face of the earth before Lula showed up. So again, behind it all is money.
Yeah, it's back to my 1986 Venezuelan corruption. It was actually refreshingly honest.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was very straightforward, and it didn't bother you. But I mean, again, when you start with this crazy war on drugs and different traffic camps and all this,
Well,
you're building up systemic corruption. And
I think I could put my finger on it in a way that you would agree with, David, which is that when it's honest and transparent, the rules of the game are available to all, and you have a chance to succeed if you're so motivated. What really is awful is when it's rigged corruption, where the rules of the game are not above board, and you have no way to win.
and that's all over the world, by the way. That's not only in.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, one of the worst things that happened in Europe, and people called me names for it, but in 2015, I don't think that von der Lungen was in. I think it was still 2015. Was von der Lungen already in, or was it still Carl? The guy before von der Lungen.
I
What
have
was
no
his name?
memory for these things.
The guy from Luxembourg or from Belgium.
I have no memory for this kind of stuff. None.
Well, they came up with. They were so proud that they came up with the idea of the European arrest warrant, and Switzerland that had 400 years of privacy that they flushed down the toilet, and then decided to start extraditing. Well, I said, guys, extradition is simply judicial kidnapping. It's just a polite way of saying judicial kidnapping. Well, back in the Soviet days, you almost never heard of extraditions. Inside the U.S., yes, but internationally, it almost never happened. And now you have judicial kidnappings or extraditions as if they're just basically a paper printing press. So it does get corrosive.
Here's how we can infuriate people if you want to over the next couple of days or weeks. Just say that Trump extradited Maduro.
No, he actually kidnapped him, but I think you bring up a very important point. Maduro was a victim of risk to Trump on the domestic scene. That's why I bring up the night of the long knives, because Trump has been at risk, and Trump must assert his authority now, or all this impeachment stuff will go on in a very strong manner. Now, if he can show that he is not afraid to act, and he is not afraid to lower the boom a couple of times, that may put him in a much stronger position.
And very importantly, in my opinion, and that he has the armed services, the the armed forces under control.
Well, you see, I didn't understand in the very beginning.
This is Trump's escape hatch. Trump's escape hatch.
You're right. You're right. I never even thought about that. It's a brilliant point, because I couldn't understand, why do you put a doofus like Pete Hegseth in there? I couldn't understand it, and now I understand his whole zeitgeist is to keep the armed forces rah, America first, everything, the Department of War, and that backs up the president. And finally explained it to me. I couldn't understand why is Pete Hegseth? The guy's not that smart. I mean, why is he there? But he's the perfect man for the job.
He is, and Trump. This is Trump's bulwark against the administrative state. For all that they managed to penetrate the armed forces at the general level, there's a. They didn't manage to empty it out, and Hegseth managed to fill it up. So with the army at his back, or not just the army, but with the armed forces at his back, Trump actually has some chance of surviving the encounter.
My question to you is, why did Dan Bongino quit?
Oh, there's a couple of things there, but I don't think he ever wanted to do that job. He was.
He's very pro-Trump.
A lot of money.
Pro-Trump.
I cannot. There's two possibilities with the FBI.
He was making too much money with his podcasts and wanted to get back to it.
I don't think his skill set is inside DC.
There's two possibilities. There's two possibilities with the FBI. One possibility is that they co-opted Patel, or the other is that it's a long con. Time will tell.
Yeah,
because Bongino is a very good spokesman for Trump.
FBI guy. That's his, and he wasn't just because Secret Service also deals with financial crimes. I mean, that's why it was initially created to go after the counterfeiters. Secret Service has an investigative arm and a very small personal protection arm. And he's from the personal protection arm. So bodyguard residents. So he's not really good at being this, but he was asked by the president, and it's hard to say no. But I don't think he wanted to do the job.
Well, I think you can't. I mean, listen, we are in my opinion, it's impossible that we are not seeing Palais de Versailles level treachery and trickery and maneuvering and lies going on in Washington at this point. So I can't take anything at face value, because everything is probably a double, triple, quadruple game.
Is he maintaining good relations with the president, though, still?
I don't know. I mean, listen,
we'll see when he leaves.
I'll say this now because, I said it to my wife, and she later said, "You're absolutely right." When this whole thing went on with Musk, and Musk saying that Trump was in the Epstein papers and everything, I said, theater, pure theater, nothing but theater. And I think events have borne me out.
Yeah, Musk is right back with Trump now all of a sudden.
That's right. And so Trump's superpower, if you will, is nobody can predict what's true and what's not true with him. And he's exploiting it to the maximum right now. He the only reason why he's not already assassinated probably is because he's been managing to keep people guessing.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of people are very angry at Trump. Oh, he's not, he's more off kilter than Trump won. I said just the opposite. He's his own man. He's appointed Witkoff, Kushner, Barrack, who I like a lot. And he brought his own people that are not working for the permanent administrative state, as you say.
Yep.
And he's been through the game once before. He was put into power to do something about the economy the way he basically did demolitions in New York. That's why they let him back in.
Okay.
Not for foreign policy. By the way,
it's Witkoff is a great example. Almost nobody understands what Witkoff's job and role and skill set is.
I think he's fantastic. And you have never heard me say a bad word about Witkoff or Barrack. I think they're fantastic.
Yeah, but most people,
and most of the Jews in the Jewish community hate him because he's not there to kiss Netanyahu's behind and to do exactly the policy that the Netanyahu government wants him to do. He has a bigger vision, and yes, he's making a lot of money. But you know what? I don't have a problem with people making money. I don't know why people have a problem with people making money. But I think that Witkoff, I think Barrack, and I think Kushner are completely aligned with Trump's vision.
But most
And
of
he
all,
needs that.
yes, he does. And so most of all, Witkoff is a cutout. Above and beyond anything else, Witkoff is a cutout.
Yep.
What do you mean by cutouts?
Witkoff can have private conversations with Trump that no one hears, and then he can go have a private conversation with Putin that no one hears.
You're right.
And notice something, he does it consistently.
That's my point. He's a cutout.
And he goes to see the Gulf, and he goes and he tells Bibi, that's okay, but you're talking to me now. And so he has a very good EQ, very good personality when he meets people. And look, proof of the pudding is Vladimir Putin always receives him, no matter what. That should tell us a lot.
Yep. Well, it's because, by pre-agreement, Putin doesn't believe anything unless it comes from Witkoff. And this is the pre-agreement. This is why Putin doesn't take it personally when Trump says to Americans, get out of Russia. I'm 100% convinced that at the beginning of the presidency, it was understood between Putin and Trump that Trump said, I'm going to have to say a lot of stuff. I'm going to have to say a lot of crazy shit over the next year or two. Pay no attention to it. If it doesn't come from Witkoff, it doesn't come from me.
I think it's fine. Well, it's a funny thing. I mean, Witkoff is not a Henry Kissinger. He doesn't have the depth of foreign policy. He doesn't speak languages.
Thank God he's not.
Yeah.
But here's the nice thing about Witkoff. Witkoff, Trump, Kushner, whose father suffered terribly, and Barrack are in the toughest. Look what they did. They put Barrack in jail too. Ankle bracelets with Obama and all that. These guys are the top tough real estate guys, and they have to knock a lot of heads together. They have to do a lot of hype, but at the same time, they have to knock a lot of heads together. And you know what? That's what it takes to do foreign policy.
Mm-hmm.
Believe it or not, in what they do in New York, they know everybody. Tom Barrack knows every single important person,
but also,
from probably Cyprus and Turkey all the way over to Saudi Arabia, every country.
Yeah.
What better person than Tom Barrack? I don't need some kind of Washington consensus guy from the State Department that basically does what the neocons want, and that's what most of the think tanks or most of the people, for example, in my community, the Jewish community, want. They want basically people that are just going to go with what we say the policy should be, a foundation for the defense of democracy, or all these other. No, these guys are the real thing.
Most of the Jews I know want an administration by committee of the professional class.
Yeah.
But these guys aren't schemers.
But has that worked in the last 20 years since the end of communism? Has it worked? And the answer for me is a resounding no.
But that's because you live outside the U.S. and you're not entirely dependent on CNN for your news.
Okay, if you take a look at something far worse than that, which is the EU, which is not even the professional class, it's basically the vassal class and the beta vassal class, it's ruined Europe completely. But history and decisions are made with people that have vision, that don't mind going out of the box. And look what they did to Trump. Trump had a perfect guy with what was his name, with the oil man at the beginning of his first term.
Exxon.
Tillerson.
Yep.
Excellent guy, and they threw him out of town. So the trouble is, you cannot throw out of town these three because they never got appointed by the Senate in the first place. Trump is also doing something very wise with Venezuela by throwing a big gift into Rubio's lap so that Rubio can go to higher office. Very smart move.
Yes.
Yep. And it's also the Venezuela no longer will be supporting Cuba. So that'll be an interesting situation. Because those Cubans, as Wasserman was pointing out earlier on the previous stream, some of them say they really want to go home and rebuild their place, and you have the same with the Venezuelans. So
yeah, it's easy for them to go home when they can fly for 30 minutes somewhere and rebuild. It's
yeah,
I don't know if they really want to go and rebuild. But remember, a lot of them are neoliberals, but we will see what happens. The point is, for Rubio, this is a big thing, and Rubio was able to take a big victory lap in Bolivia, big victory lap in Argentina. So Rubio, who could have been a major problem, remember at one time Trump and Rubio were not even on talking terms. Little Marco. At this point, Trump has completely put Rubio onto his team.
Yes.
And Rubio is very, very powerful with that lobby, and I'm sure that Rubio is very pleased.
Yep. No, that was, I have to say, that was when Trump first got elected. That was the appointment that really blew my mind. And I have to say, I haven't seen a single thing that makes me believe that Trump misstepped there. He knew what he was doing.
He has been doing sabotage on Ukraine because he is not, but they've taken him off that file. He was brought in as soon as they announced him. I was like, oh, this is all about South America.
Well, Trump doesn't mind if people disagree with him.
Rubio has been very, very loyal to Trump. The other thing that Trump does that I like that I have not seen any other president do, he has tons of press conferences and he has his cabinet sitting with him all the time. Yeah. It's a very interesting tactic that even Nixon didn't do, but certainly after that, Obama never did it. Bush didn't even have 100 IQ, I don't think. But none of these imperial presidents ever do it. Now, Trump is not an imperial president. He may be imperial, but notice that his cabinet is with him all the time, with him at every press conference, and has equal rights to speak.
No, in fact, I got to tell you, the biggest complaint that some of the supposed MAGA people have with Trump is that he's not an imperial president. They want somebody who's going to misbehave the way the past administrations have misbehaved, but this time on their side.
Yeah.
And, Trump has steadfastly refused to impinge on states' rights. So,
I mean, the MAGA people are getting to be a little bit cartoonish also.
Well, I will say that I'm a very paranoid guy. So, I mistrust people who supposedly speak for MAGA. I consider them possible sock puppets or just brainwashed or,
brainwashed, not particularly smart. Some take a libertarian view. What surprises me, though, is that Steve Bannon has kind of turned on Trump. That surprises me.
We don't know. I mean, this it has a smell of theater, just like with Elon. It's definitely to Trump's interest to keep his opponents guessing as to who's on his side and who's not. And
true.
Yeah, so I take like I say, this is Palais de Versailles level intrigue. At this point,
well, I've got to tell you, now that you tell me about the aircraft carrier, which I wasn't even aware of, I think we do agree that a lot of what happened today was purely aimed at the domestic U.S. audience, especially his opponents in Washington, more than it was anywhere else.
Naked power play. It was shocking, actually, to me.
You think he did that on his own, or he did it with Hesketh, or he did it with Hesketh and Gabbard? Or who do you think he?
I don't know. Again, I don't dare to guess because one of the things that I often say is that anybody who predicts or anyone who claims to know exactly what Trump is up to is immediately discredited with me. Nobody knows what he's up to. And like we talked about last time, if you've ever dealt with any of these extremely powerful guys, that's the way they are. They never tell anyone everything. They are on their own. They're alone in this world till the day they die. Well,
except that Trump has some brains. I mean, Biden was brain dead, so that's. And I don't think that Starmer has any talent. I don't think anybody in Europe has any talent.
God, no. I
Uh,
mean, they're
We have
puppets.
people in Europe had talent, like our friend in Hungary.
Well, I'm talking about the mainstream ones in the West.
Yeah. No, I mean, obviously not.
Yeah,
Obviously,
they've all
they're-
elected into these theater kids like Trudeau and Macron.
and as I said, that's the way the liberal electorate likes it. You know, these are, I know because I come from that world, and people in that world like the idea of an administrative state. They dislike the idea of an individual macho leader. This is what they want. They're getting what they voted for, which is
So
a cabal.
so whether it's the permanent administrative state or whether it's the disaster in Brussels, it's all the mem shows. It's all the same. There's no
Yes,
difference.
that's the point. That's what I'm
There's
saying.
no leaders.
They're
No
getting
one
what
can
they-
make a decision.
That's what
Nobody
they-
can make a decision.
That's what they like. They like the hidden hand of the committee decision. You
But
know,
that's
and
why the world is in the mess that it's in today.
yeah. I don't disagree.
I
for a
think it's a,
Why don't we? It's getting a little later into the
Yeah,
stream.
okay. We could. Do you want to do another one tomorrow, and we'll discuss the Middle East a little bit more?
Oh, if
Yeah,
you
because
want
I really
now,
want to compare notes. My friends, my Syrian expat friends, sent me a nice video about how wonderful things are in Damascus. That's why I asked you that.
They are. They are. I just cannot understand the hatred that the Israeli government has for Ahmed al-Sharar. I do understand it. It's because of their failures in Gaza. I think it's one of the biggest mistakes that Israel has made. Oh, he's a jihadist. He's a this. He's a that. He's a that. Actually, if on privately you want to send me those videos and have a conversation, are your expats living over there?
No, they're in Canada.
All right, I wouldn't mind interacting with them because I'm a little bit involved in that. No, I mean, right now, had Israel behaved, and it didn't, Israel could be very easily controlling southern Syria, and I'll tell you the reason why. Al-Sharar, whatever you think of him and whatever names you want to call him, came up the hard way, was a very hard-nosed fellow to get that far, to become mayor of Idlib, to beat back, work with the U.S. for 12, 13 years. And he knows very, very well not to get into huge fights with the Bedouins, with the Kurds. Now, some of the stuff he wasn't able to control.
yeah,
And the Syrian government made big mistakes on the coast, and they made big mistakes but it turns out that the Israelis were arming this Hijri guy and these warlords in Sweda long before the troubles started. So there's no black and white. But the one thing that al-Sharar does not want, from everything I understand, is to have Turkey south of Homs. He wants to control Damascus. And that's where Israel could come in as real useful. But because I consider Bibi has a paralyzed cabinet, they've got this minister of the diaspora that's saying we're going to go to war with Syria, that he needs to be overthrown, he has to be this and that. I think Israel's just missing.
Tomorrow. Let's get into it tomorrow. Let's get into it tomorrow because it is getting late.
okay.
That's a long conversation. I want to go to dinner, but anyway, I think the Venezuelan was more important today, and interesting.
Yep.
So I'll be happy to talk about Syria and try to understand the weeds a little bit better on what's going on. But what I don't like, and the last thing I'm going to say is
the Russians are still there.
The Russians are there, and Israel has a great relation with Vladimir Putin. I mean, one of the things I really objected to during the Ukraine war was how many Israelis and Jews in the Israeli government were busy supporting the Ukro-Nazis. I mean, if you saw on January 1st, the torchlight parades taking place in Kiev and elsewhere, not just in Uzhhorod or in actually, what's the main city? Lviv. Lvov is the headquarters of the Banderites. And I mean, those are real super duper neo-Nazis. And the fact that you have all these Jews that are supporting them because of the big bad Putin, it's cartoonish.
Yeah.
But Russia will never get into a bad situation with Israel. We have too many Russian Jews there. It just will not happen.
Yeah, again. Well, let's talk about it all tomorrow. It is late, and I don't think anyone who's been listening to this whole conversation has a low IQ. So
yeah.
Do we have any listeners? I have no idea because
We have one steady one here today. It's JP, who's usually our usual commentator. commentator. I know him from some other groups. Brian stopped by and Paul stopped by.
Yeah.
So Brian is.
I mean, it would certainly be nice to build up another. I think we're never going to be big, but it would be nice to build things up. I don't know how you do it, but it's.
You make content like this on a regular basis. That's how you do it. You just have to make content. Another way to get big will be when we have a bit more. I was waiting for the new year, but we can definitely, once we have stuff, we can bring on, try to reach out to people. And some people will say yes to come on small podcasts. Tom Longo being the most that one in our sphere. But I could see.
Tom would do it for sure. Tom was just
like
on with. Tom was just on with a guy that I know from Rogue News, and he only gets 2-3 people at a time. So I mean, that's.
Tom has said he'll do any show once, and I mean we're both patrons of him. David, someone like John Kiriakou, if I connected him, I'm sure he would come on.
Yeah, he would come on. I have to cool it on the Israel thing with him a little bit, but he's very good. So.
We wouldn't be talking Israel with him, or
no.
We would talk more Iraq. That seems to be his thing.
All right, guys, have a good evening. We'll talk tomorrow.
Okay, bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Oh yeah.
Bye.
As my guest co-panelists depart, I want to say once again, thanks for watching and listening and participating in the chats. And we're starting to grow a little bit, and it's nice to have stuff here. And what we need to do is provide you with the content, so you'll keep coming back. So if you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And we'll be seeing you on. I guess it sounds like we're meeting up tomorrow for another meeting. Thank you. Bye-bye.